Welcome to I Said It, part of the Go for the Two radio network. I'm Joe Lisi. August is here, and it's college football time, baby. There is nothing better. Throughout the week, I've been breaking down the top 25 battles. There's some news and notes as it relates to top 5, top 10 teams, including the Ohio State Buckeyes. They start week number 1 against the Texas Longhorns. There's a potential quarterback battle. We'll get into that. News around LSU. I blame Carver for this one. He reached out to me a little bit earlier about a clip about Brian Kelly. Kelly dealing with Nussmeier's agent. That came out on SEC, I think, Unfiltered or Storyline. Next thing you know, Garrett Nussmeier all over X and all over the news boards left practice today. There was thoughts about potentially being a season-ending injury. That was the news being circulated. A lot of people on X, though, have come out and said he's going to be fine. And then the news in the NFL. We've seen Dak Prescott come out. He's said some things about Micah Parsons and that situation unfolding in Dallas. And then the situation with just the Jimmy Garoppolo now taking over for Matt Stafford. Stafford does have a neck injury. We've seen some fluctuation as well in the odds market. I told you earlier in the week and throughout the offseason, I was on the Arizona Cardinals to potentially steal the NFC West about a week and a half ago. They were plus 430 to win the NFC West. Now the injury to Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo in taking snaps. All of a sudden you see in Arizona at plus 370 and Seattle now at plus 550, bottom of the barrel. When you look at LA and you look at this team as a whole, not sold on them. And when you talk about Matt Stafford and then Jimmy Garoppolo, even though Garoppolo is a veteran, has played in the system with Sean McVay, that's a considerable drop-off. They bring in Devontae Adams. We know about the defense last year led by Jared Verse and Fisk. They stepped up, played very well at times. But in order for LA to win the NFC West, get back to a 10-win season, they're going to need Matt Stafford under center. We're starting to see some things unfold as it relates to the odds market. So we'll break those down a little bit later in the show. I'll break down as well some week 1 matchups in the NFL. Do have my eye on some games in week number 0 for college football and week number 1 as well. We'll break down some statistics. We'll break down some storylines for the big games. I'll be on for about 30, maybe 35 minutes tonight. Maybe tomorrow as well with Coach. I got to check Coach's schedule. We broke down some SEC battles yesterday, but we'll get into some storylines. And this is important when you just look at college football as a whole. And when you look at where the teams are, the top 25 came out. I mentioned that there's a quarterback battle taking place. Julian Sayin potentially named the starter week number 1 against Texas. Right now, they're in a quarterback battle. You ask Ryan Day and what that situation comes out 2 weeks out, it's Kleinholtz battling Sayin right now. Sayin does have the experience out of both quarterbacks. You look at last year, he completed 41% of his passes, limited action. But you're talking about a team that is playing the top-ranked Texas Longhorns in the Horseshoe, 12 o'clock start, big noon kickoff, all eyes on Ohio State if they can defend that national championship. And I've talked about it throughout the offseason. The quarterback situation is concerning. The running back situation, moving on from Travion Henderson and moving on from Quinshon Judkins, is big. But the OC and Chip Kelly and the defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, is going to put a lot of pressure on Ryan Day and this team. It's just no doubt about it. And Ryan Day does have a lease on life, right? They dominated in the college football playoff. They had a 4-game heater and were hitting on all cylinders, got the most out of Will Howard in a 4-game stretch. You look at what they were able to do just as it relates to the passing attack. Will Howard averaged 289 passing yards per game, 8 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Can you get that type of productivity from the start of the season to the end and then carry it through a college football playoff appearance? That's what we have to find out for Ohio State. They have potentially one of the best playmakers on the field in all of college football. He's a 16-1 shot to win the Heisman. I'm talking about Jeremiah Smith, the way he took that game over in the second half against Notre Dame. We'll see if he can continue that with Sayin or Kleinholtz under center week number 1. But if you're Texas and you're going in with Arch Manning and you're going in with the expectation to really knock off Ohio State, the team that you had dead to rights potentially, you were looking 21-21 right in the face. You had a 1st and goal, the play call on 1st down, the play call on 2nd down, the toss sweep to just put your team in a long 3rd down situation. Steve Sarkisian's been thinking about that all off season. Quinn Ewers, deer in the headlights on 4th and goal, holding the ball way too long. Better to have an interception in the end zone than to have what transpired, the scoop and score, and to kill the 5.5 and the 7.5 and all the alt spreads that we saw play out in that matchup. They lose it by 14 points. Can they rebound? The expectation, knowing that the boosters and knowing how NIL has really loaded this team right now. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. And we talk about just the identity of both teams. What is the identity of Ohio State? What is the identity of Texas this year? Are they just going to be a 5-wide pass-happy offense? Are they going to utilize Arch now that he's the starter more in the RPO game? We saw that transpire throughout the regular season in limited packages. But you can't afford to have Arch Manning go down this year. You can't afford to rely on Arch Manning on the ground. You have to rely on the offensive line. You have to rely on your running backs, Wisner, and all of the 2nd and 3rd teamers to step up and have a dominant rushing attack. And that's the one thing. When you look at Texas last year, they averaged about 158 rushing yards per game. You look at the playoff win over Clemson. They dominated on the ground. They beat up a physical defensive front in the Clemson Tigers and ran for over 200 yards. That took the pressure right off of Quinn Ewers in that matchup. But you look at the last 2 games for Texas, the 2 games that you could say the Texas defense was exposed, Arizona State and Ohio State. That offense only rushed for 1.7 yards against Arizona State and 2 yards per carry against Ohio State. They ran for 53 and 57 yards, respectively. They need a better effort against better competition. It's going to start week number 1 against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, what is the drop-off? What is the drop-off from Jim Knowles to Matt Patricia? I've said this consistently. Matt Patricia, good defensive coordinator, great at the NFL level. This is a different animal in college. You're dealing with college kids. You have to understand what motivates them. What motivated the New England Patriots and the Detroit Lions defense when he was head coach and everything else is not going to work on the college level anymore. It's a different animal. That's why Chip Kelly went from head coach at UCLA to an offensive coordinator at Ohio State, now the OC in Las Vegas. Couldn't deal with it. Not many coaches can. Certain coaches understand the landscape. Dan Lanning, Lane Kiffin, the younger head coaches. Ryan Day, to a degree, gets it. But what's going to happen overall for Texas? If you're banking on the number 1 team in the nation, you better put up or shut up. You're going into a hostile environment, defending national champs, and you're expected to win. You're expected to dominate that game and live up to expectations. And we saw this line when we looked at it earlier in the offseason. There were 3.5s across the board. 3.5s across the board. And we've seen movement now on Texas, on Arch Manning, on this team as a whole to say, hey, are you for real? Are you the best team in the country? Are you really the Heisman Trophy frontrunner? Is this your show, or are we just the same old Texas? Are we just the same old team that can brag? We got the money, we got the players, and then we get cracked in the mouth and we fold like an accordion. That's what fans want to see. They want to see you go into the horseshoe and step up. And that is going to be really the matchup for me on Texas. If Texas can run the football, they should be in position to potentially steal the game. You have to win the turnover battle. You have to step up and make plays, especially defensively. But you would believe the defense, when you look at it, 7 starters coming back, a defense that only gave up and allowed opposing quarterbacks to convert and complete 59% of their passes. Whether it be Kleinholtz or whether it be Sayin, you're talking about inexperience. You're going to have to lock down Jeremiah Smith. You're going to have to force Ohio State into long third down situations. Win on third down. Most underrated statistic in all of college football. If you can get off the field on third down, you have a shot. You have a shot. This is it. It's number one. And don't think, right? Look at this. Been working the graphics all day. Don't think that the coaches and everybody involved as it relates to college football wants to start out number 1 versus number 2. I said it. We got the top-ranked team in the country. We're the Texas Longhorns. Here we come. Well, you better shut up. You better put up. You better try and tack a 40 spot on that Ohio State defense. It's not going to be easy. With or without Jim Knowles there, you're still going to have to put up points. You're still going to have to be aggressive with your play calling. I would give the edge to Sark and the Texas offense over Ohio State defensively, at least early on. And people will say, well, why do you feel that? And I've said this time and time again. Again, Patricia's right now in practice situations. He's seeing the talent respond against his own guys, scout team and everything else. It is a different animal when you get there and you have the number 1 team in the country and you have an offensive mind that Steve Sarkisian that does like to utilize multiple formations. How can Caleb Downs in that defense make adjustments? They're a veteran secondary for the most part, so they should be able to respond. But you would give the edge to Sarkisian throwing different types of formations out week number 1 against Matt Patricia. If he's looking at the tape, throw in a different wrinkle. Utilize motion to create one-on-one mismatches. That's what you have to do, especially when you have 6 months of preparation, guy. You have 6 months of preparation to get it done or implement the game plan offensively with a veteran quarterback. That's what you have to do on a consistent basis. And that will make or break whether Texas covers this line and pulls it outright. And again, that is what people want to see. And I talked about Texas and their inability to run the football in the 2 games that mattered. They didn't cover against Arizona State. They certainly didn't cover against Ohio State as a 5.5, 6-point dog. Can they cover now, basically winning the game outright? 2.5, 3 points. And we'll get into that a little bit later from the spread perspective. If you're looking at Texas and the matchup, can Ohio State throw over the top of Texas? I talked about Texas statistically. Only gave up 9 passing touchdowns all season long. Opportunistic, forced 22 interceptions. I mentioned the 59% completion percentage by opposing quarterbacks. They only allowed 173 passing yards per game. But Klubnik was able to have success. Arizona State in the second half was able to have success. Some of it was gadget plays. The others, Sam Levitt finally came through. They wore down in that game. So can Jeremiah Smith, can Ryan Day force that secondary to read coverage, to force them against and cover the best player on the field? We'll see. That's what I want to see play out. And can Sayin or Kleinholtz make those type of throws the way we saw some other veteran quarterbacks on that secondary last year? And a couple games for Texas as well, when you just look at it. I mean, I thought Sark did a terrible job against Vanderbilt. You have a 14-point lead in the first half against Diego Pavia and Clark Lee, and you can't make adjustments. You allow that team back in. I don't care if it was on the road. The play calling at the end of the half was absolutely terrible, was gutless. You're up by 14 points. You have Quinn Ewers at midfield, and you cannot score points. You're afraid to score points, and you limp into halftime with a 14-point lead, and you're holding on for dear life in the fourth quarter to win that game by basically 3 points. That's terrible. That's the problem when people think about Texas. Where is the killer instinct? Is it consistent from the start of the year to the end of the year? You could do it against Alabama a couple of seasons ago, but you can't do it from week 1 through week 15 or 16. That's what people want to say and see to erase the perception of the Texas Longhorns being soft. Woohoo! Texas, #1, baby! Woohoo! That's great. Who cares? It's August. We care in January. We care in a college football playoff appearance when you're playing teams like Washington and Kalen DeBoer, or when you're playing teams like Ohio State that only allowed 87 rushing yards per game. That's when fans care. That's when people that are back in Texas from the gambling perspective and sports wagering perspective care. Nobody cares in August. Can you do it in a road environment? And we'll see, because they were 6-2 last year, Texas was, in road environments. They were 6-2. And I tell you, they didn't cover against Vanderbilt either. That was a terrible performance in the second half. They won those 6 games only by an average margin of victory of 13.5 points per game. We talked last night with Coach Bowden how dominant Notre Dame was on the road or on a neutral field. They were 8-1. They won in 5 neutral field spots. Granted, I know it was Army, it was Navy, it was Georgia Tech, but they still beat Penn State and Georgia on a neutral field. That was a dominant defensive showing. Can Texas have that type of elevation? Can they have that type of success? And for quite honestly, Ryan Day, now's the opportunity to really put the pedal to the metal. Just because you won a national championship last year, can you keep that train in motion the way Kirby Smart did a few seasons ago, and how Nick Saban had that program humming for basically 15 seasons? That's what Ohio State fans want to see. You start reverting back to yourself where it looked like it was more Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles than you, they're going to be calling for Ryan Day yet again. And you have an opportunity right now to dominate Texas. Can you do it with so many moving parts? If Ohio State can cover this line and win, let's just say by 10 plus over Arch Manning, the Heisman favorite right now on multiple books, and that defense steps up and lives up to expectations. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? That's a huge notch in the belt for Ryan Day. And we talked about where they were. I mentioned 289 passing yards per game. They averaged 4.9 yards per carry. They average 166 yards on the ground. Can you get that type of productivity on the ground to keep you into short, manageable third down situations, especially with the inexperience at the quarterback position? Because you know Texas, from a defensive perspective, is going to dial it up. Ohio State last year, 8-1 at home. We know about the loss to Michigan as a 20.5-point favorite. 8-1 at home, they were dominant. 32.7 margin of victory when you just look at the numbers. On the road or on a neutral field site, 6-1 includes the college football playoff, 17.8 points per game margin of victory. Okay? They only gave up 13 points per game. They had a 36% third down defense, 53 total sacks, only gave up 10 passing touchdowns, forced 10 interceptions in the back end. That's the matchup. Can you force and put the pressure on Arch Manning? Can you put the pressure on Texas to convert on third down situations? Can you get the crowd involved early? So I can't wait for this matchup. It's #1 versus #2. This is what it's all about. If you're a college football fan, you want to see this right out of the gate. And we'll see if both teams can live up to the hype. Week number 1. Carver, I got to talk about this LSU situation. Garrett Nussmeier is the most important factor and component to LSU's success this year. If Nussmeier goes down, they are dead to rights. Dead to rights. Rip up the 8.5s. Rip up everything you have regarding the tickets. He's an experienced quarterback. You talk about just second-year success for LSU quarterbacks. Joe Burrow won a Natty. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. Garrett Nussmeier has the potential, and I know you could call me a homer. Oh, you're a homer. No, I'm not a homer. I just call it what it is. And I called out Brian Kelly as much as anybody. Great head coach year number 1. You bring an SEC West title to Baton Rouge. You bring all that optimism. You knock around and kick the mad scientist right in the stones. You kick them right there, winning that game in overtime with Mason Taylor catching the 2-point conversion. And then we have a slow regression. Nobody cares that we smacked around Baylor in the bowl game, that we put up 45 plus. We care about winning an SEC championship. And more importantly, getting to the college football playoff. They're down from plus 134 in the offseason to now plus 110. And the news across multiple outlets today, and I'll go to the local news, and this was WDSU out of Louisiana in New Orleans. Despite social media rumor, star Garrett Nussmeier is not injured. Thankfully. You could blame Carver for that one. But the thought was that he suffered a serious knee injury. And if that's the case, then rip up the tickets and move on to 2026, because even though they have star wide receivers, you need the veteran experience with Nussmeier. And again, we shall see what transpires. But the pressure is on Brian Kelly. The pressure is on this team as a whole. You can't win an SEC West title and regress. And there's multiple coaches that have stress on them in the SEC. Let me go to my SEC storylines. I'm going to throw out 2 other coaches, and we could share the lines and the odds perspective, okay? The first is Hugh Freeze and Auburn, okay? Hugh Freeze has as much pressure as Brian Harsin does, and any other coach that couldn't step up. Gene Chizik, after he won a national championship. Hugh Freeze is dead man walking on the plains unless this team is 9-3 or challenging at least for an outside shot at a college football playoff appearance. And we've seen huge fluctuations, okay, in the odds market for week 1 and just Auburn as a whole. So you see my screen right there. This game right now, back on FanDuel, right? Auburn, a 2.5-point favorite. Total is 56.5, going up against Sawyer, Robertson, and Baylor. That line earlier was Auburn 2.5, and then about a week and a half ago, or maybe even less than that, we saw Baylor flip to a favorite, and now we saw more money come in on Jackson Arnold and the Auburn Tigers. Okay, great. So here's the situation. And I've said this about Hugh Freeze. When you talk about so smart, he's stupid. Because Hugh Freeze built up Liberty with quarterbacks a couple of years ago, Caden Salter, that now is at Colorado, and Malik Willis, that had one of the most dynamic, explosive offenses in all of college football. They were beating up, Liberty was, on all the ACC teams. They took Virginia Tech to the woodshed, almost knocked off NC State. in Raleigh. You could go on, smacked around Syracuse. He always did it with a mobile quarterback. So you would think that, hey, you know what? Let's get a mobile quarterback in Auburn. So what does he do? Hugh Freeze decides to go out and he gets Peyton Thorne from Michigan State. Great. That's awesome. Let's get Peyton Thorne. Peyton Thorne is the Statue of Liberty there. They had Robbie Ashford, who was the most raw athletic quarterback that you could potentially maybe develop. And does Hugh Freeze go with that quarterback and Robbie Ashford? No, he pushes him out to South Carolina to back up Lenora Sellers. Great job, Hugh. You're doing wonders. Now, his coaching status and his resume and his tenure in Auburn hinge on Jackson Arnold, the transfer from Oklahoma. And if you watch Jackson Arnold throughout last year in multiple big games, I'll throw a couple out there. Jackson Arnold at Tennessee, deer in the headlights, had to be pulled from Michael Hawkins that actually led Oklahoma on a scoring drive against one of the better defenses in the SEC. And then you put in Jackson Arnold where the defense on the road in the Grove against Ole Miss was actually playing lights out. They held Jackson Dart and that team to 26 total points. Jackson Arnold looked like a deer. He was getting smacked around with so many lefts. The kid was begging for a right at the end of the game. And now Hugh Freeze is hinging on Jackson Arnold to carry them to the promised land. I will say this. It's an intriguing battle. When you look at that matchup, when you look at that week one battle in Waco, and you look at that battle just as a whole, Sawyer Robertson and that total, it's 56.5. It hasn't moved. 56.5 on FanDuel right now. I'll go back to it. 56.5. You might have 70 points in that game. I like Baylor, and I know it's an SEC Big 12 type of game. I get that, and I know their backs are against the wall, and I want to back Auburn in every way possible. But you have an Auburn defense that, to me, still hasn't showed their true colors. You have a team that played well at times and then just allowed teams to come from behind and steal it on you. And go back to that Oklahoma game with Michael Hawkins. Michael Hawkins was playing terrible in that game. He was absolutely atrocious and somehow, some way won that game 24-21 because Hugh Freeze and that team couldn't find any answers. They were negative in turnover margin last year. The numbers were terrible for Auburn, -9 in turnover margin. That's got to be taught by the head coach. And now Sawyer Robertson, I talk about one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of college football, and what this team was able to do last year. They put up 31 points. I know LSU's defense wasn't as dominant as it was, and at times they were a sieve, but to put up 31 points in the bowl game and to just see Baylor just light teams up. They lit up Texas Tech. I mean, they lit up teams last year. Go through the scores. They won 6 of the last 7 games prior to the bowl game. They won 6 straight. They beat Tech 59-35 in their house in Lubbock. They beat gutless Oklahoma State 38-28. They beat TCU in a barn burner 37-34. They went on the road in Morgantown 49-35 against Willie Fritz and Houston in H-Town 20-10. They could play a low-scoring game. And then they blast Kansas, who at the time with Lance Leipold was playing as good as anybody, had knocked off Iowa State, had knocked off Colorado. That was a dominant win, both offensively and defensively, to knock off the Jayhawks when they needed that win to become bowl eligible. And you look at Sawyer Robertson and how many games did they throw over 400? He had one, and that was against LSU, but he had multiple 300-yard performances. And now another year in the system, 28 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. You talk about the wide receiver core. Josh Cameron, 34, one of the most underrated wide receivers that came on. He had 52 receptions, 754 yards, and 10 touchdowns. They're going to be a wide open offense. Hopefully Aranda could get it back. And Aranda saved his job last year. They're catching 2.5 points. We've seen the back and forth from SEC to Big 12. They have one of the hardest schedules, Baylor does, to potentially win 9 games. But I think they have a very good shot. I'm not worried about the schedule. I'll take my shot with Baylor, win total-wise. I'm going to take a shot on the quarterback, the Texas Tech transfer, and I'll go through Baylor's schedule right now. We talk about one of the hardest in the nation. Auburn, SMU, Samford, Arizona State. They get Auburn and Arizona State at home. They then have to go on the road to Oak State. Oak State didn't win a Big 12 championship, Big 12 game last year. K-State is a telltale game, but you get them in Waco. Winnable. And we saw K-State, 2 games that they struggled. They struggled mightily against BYU, lost that game outright as a 6.5-point favorite, and struggled against Tulane on the road. So they're not a very good road team last year with Chris Kleiman. We'll see if they could do it against Iowa State in Germany. Cincinnati, that's a difficult game as well. That's on the road. We'll see how that plays out. But UCF, I like Baylor as a whole. I think they're going over their win total. And I like Sawyer Robertson. And we'll go through the numbers right now. Let me just see. Win total for Baylor is 7.5, 8.5 on multiple books. I'll give it to you right now on FanDuel. Baylor. 7.5 minus 104. And that's because of the schedule. I'll take my shot. I'm taking my shot. I'm calling my shot with Baylor in the Big 12. I like them as well to potentially steal it and win the conference. You want to know the number on Baylor? Plus 650. Right behind Arizona State at 6-1. And that's the biggest thing, I think, too, when you look at Arizona State, is if you're looking at Arizona State, you don't look so much at Cam Scatterbo and the offense with Sam Levitt. They were great. And Scatterbo was the main reason why they potentially almost knocked off Texas. But one of the most underrated statistics and one of the most underrated teams, I want to say, on the defensive side of the ball was the Arizona State Sun Devils. 112 rushing yards allowed. Multiple games where they forced teams under 4 yards per carry. Third down defense, one of the best. And you just look at it last year at the end of the regular season. You look at that game against Texas, they were able to get off the field on third down. That's what you want to see from this team moving on. They held Texas to 38% on third down conversions. They held Arizona in the game, 40%, 27% for Oak State, 25% against Cincinnati. There were times that they were able to get off the field, and that defense really stepped up. They forced teams to move between the 30s. Once they got into the red zone, Arizona State buckled up, held teams to field goals and not touchdowns. They play that way throughout the Big 12 season. 6-1 isn't a bad number to repeat potentially as a Big 12 champion. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Utah and Whittingham, they've lost their identity. They're going back to Dampier, their former New Mexico quarterback. They want to run the football. Can they get back to the running the football and relying on sound defense to potentially win games? It's possible. Do I believe in Utah as a whole? I think last year was a telltale sign they've slightly regressed. There were teams that exposed them, and they typically struggle against speed type of teams. That's always an area and a cause of concern. I would go under early on when I look at Utah this year and buying back into Kyle Whittingham and this team in the Big 12. Just get an updated win total for you. 7.5 to the under at plus 132. I think they could be right there at 7-6. We'll look at their schedule quick with Dampier, and everybody's expecting Dampier to be dominant. Oh, the kid's mobile. The kid's got great legs. Okay, yeah, he does. But he's going to Utah, and he's playing against Big 12 opponents now. You're not playing against Conference USA and Sun Belt teams, and every now and then an FCS opponent. You need to really step up. And we look at their schedule right now. The schedule lines up. I said 7.5. I'm going to the under. UCLA on the road, not easy. A lot of pressure on Deshaun Foster and Nico. Cal Poly, there's a win. Wyoming, not easy on the road. Texas Tech, hey, Texas Tech in your house, Salt Lake City. But they're going to be improved. Morton comes back. They got some transfer help. West Virginia in Morgantown. Arizona State in Provo, the Holy War. Colorado, Cincinnati. Cincinnati was very improved. I know the record didn't say that, but they were gutty at times. They lost some close games. Baylor on the road, Kansas State and Kansas. I just don't see Utah with or without Dampier living up to expectations to be an 8-win football team. I just don't see it. The chin, Kyle Whittingham. So, but it's Utah. So, I said it, not you. Utah under. I like Utah under this year. I think the schedule is very difficult, and I'm not sold that they're going to get there. And I'm not buying in to Dampier, and I'm not buying into the team. So there you go. We'll give you some other win totals. Let's see. And obviously, gamble at your own risk. We have fun on the show. This is what it's all about. But I can't buy into it. Can't do it. Cannot do it. Won't do it. Can't do it. And I like the Big 12. Let me just say this. Big 12, very competitive conference, but it looks great on the screen. Looks absolutely great on the screen. I love the Big 12. I'll give you one. If you could get an alt line. Here's one that I look at alt. Now, I've been very critical of Connor Wegman. I said he absolutely sucked last year. And week number 1 against Notre Dame, he looked like a deer in the headlights. Barely threw for 100 yards, right? They have built an identity with Willie Fritz. They got over the win total last year. They were competitive. We know that they want to run the football. Can you give me competent quarterback play? Can you give it to me, man? Can I have it? Can I taste it? Connor Wegman comes to Houston, and it's heavily juiced, heavily at minus 194. But you look at this schedule for Houston, and you look at the schedule, baby. And let me just say this. The schedule, Stephen F. Austin, Rice, Colorado, Oregon State, Texas Tech, Oak State. And we said Oklahoma State didn't win a Big 12 game last year. Arizona with Noah Fafita, gutless, especially now with Tat McMillan in the NFL. Arizona State, very difficult game. West Virginia, not easy. There's somehow West Virginia, Houston games very difficult. The bounce house, Against UCF, you got TCU and Baylor, who I'm high on. But here we go. 1, 2. The Colorado game is a swing game, but you know what? At home, not bad. Julian Lewis or Caden Salter, we'll say Salter starts, they could potentially be 4-0. 4-0, and they get the Oak State game or Arizona, UCF, they could be a 7 or an 8-win football team. I like Houston over, but I'm not willing to play it at minus 194, but I think they blow through that number. You want a lottery ticket to win the Big 12? I mean, to win the Big 12, you believe in Willie Fritz, you believe in this team. Like I said, the front runners I like are Arizona State and Baylor. But Houston at 30-1, if they're going to run the football, they're going to have sound defense, and Connor Wegman can get you competent quarterback play. It's not a bad number. I saw Jalen Daniels breaking out everything. He's back, baby. He's back. He's got the NFT on his neck again. Non-fungible token. His highlight reel, they're 14-1. Can they start fast? I'll give you some other win totals. I'm going to sell this team. Ole Miss under the 8.5, minus 105. Again, Austin Simmons, that team as a whole, look, they've done a fantastic job. Lane Kiffin has done fantastic work in the Grove. But you lose Walter Nolan, you lose your starting quarterback, you lose Trey Harris, a lot of pieces to put back into place. And without huge big game experience and expecting this team to be there and be a 9-10 win football team and a college football playoff contender like you were last year, Lane. And Lane, stop. I love you. You've done a great job. But let's not complain about having 4 teams from the SEC, 5 teams from the conference. You had an opportunity. Action, Jackson Dart and your team let you down. You were gutless. You were starting to shake with the play calling sheet in the swamp. Week number 14, your team in a position to steal the game, couldn't do it. Your quarterback, deer in the headlights, throws 2 critical interceptions. You get outplayed by DJ Lagway. Under 8.5. So for Ole Miss. So for Ole Miss. We'll give a couple others out. Why not? How about this one? Nebraska to potentially be over 7.5. I'll take it a step further. Why not? I like Matty. Oh, Matty Rule. You like Matty Rule? I love Matty Rule. Blue-collar guy. Better college coach than he was in Carolina. I'll just say that. I mean, heck, had Baker Mayfield didn't know what to do with him. I mean, that's crazy. But I'll say this. We talk about Ohio State. We talk about the Big Ten. We talk about potential teams in a position. Nebraska, 40-1 to win the Big Ten. And we'll talk about the schedule, okay? 40-1 Nebraska to win the Big Ten, okay? So here we go. Cincinnati, Akron, HCU, Michigan. Not easy, but it's in Lincoln. Sharon Moore not going to be there. Michigan State, always a crazy game. You could go back to the days of Adrian Martinez. You can go back to the days of Tommy Armstrong. Those Michigan State and Nebraska games are absolutely crazy, off the rails. Go back to the Bo Pelini days. Maryland, you got to beat Mike. You got to slap around Mike Loxley in Maryland. You cannot allow that team to beat you. Minnesota, another team that all of a sudden, PJ owns Matt Rule at times. Northwestern, USC, UCLA, and then right there, you got Penn State and Iowa. Is it safe to say, outside the Michigan game, they should be able to be in a position to smack around every single one of those teams? And if Dylan Raiola could progress and that team from a defensive perspective could step up defensively and shut down the run, why can't they potentially be in a position to win a Big 10 championship? And let me just say this. What game last year had Ohio State on life support? It wasn't Tennessee with them walking out before the game. Well, the Tennessee Volunteers, we're shirtless, baby. We get smacked around in the horseshoe. We'll lather it up. We'll lather it up. It was Nebraska that had Ohio State dead to rights. Nebraska that went into the horseshoe and was in a position to steal that game in the fourth quarter, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it, baby. But they were there. They were in a position. Nebraska could steal the Big Ten this year if everything goes right. And when you look at it, just look at the top 25. Look at it right now. And you just look at these teams. Sure, they could do it. Why not? You look at Ohio State and you just look at where they are, right? Ohio State struggled. And now they have to open up with Texas. What does that do to the mindset? What does that do to the psyche of that team, right? And what does that do to everything? I don't know. But I will say this. I will say this right now. I like it. I think there's value there. And I just think that when you look at Ohio State and you look at some of the other teams that people are banking on, I'm willing to take a shot on Nebraska. I'm willing to do that and think it at 40-1. I mean, come on. 40-1 for Nebraska is not bad value. Everybody's talking about Brett Bielema and Luke Altmaier. I'll take a shot on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I mentioned Auburn. That was a play Carver and I were under on. If you listen to the show, we sold Auburn the win total. I don't like them. I don't like where they stand. I don't like Hugh Freeze where he is from the quarterback perspective. I don't like where he is just in terms of the program. I think they can underachieve. I'll go through a couple of conferences, and we're just wetting the palate. Like I said, I want to be on every day talking about college football. LSU in the SEC, it's LSU and Georgia early on. LSU plus 550, Georgia 3-1, I think has value. You want to take deeper shots in the SEC, I think South Carolina. And I just bring up South Carolina just because of a physicality perspective. They have a good quarterback that's mobile. They did it against good teams. Talking about Clemson, they won in road environments. They were battle-tested. They were peaking at the end of the season. You want to take a shot 32-1. Now people say, there's no shot. I understand that. But if we're talking double digits or more, I can't back Elko. I can't back Marcel Reed. I can't back Lagway and Florida. That's everybody's favorite now. I can't do Ole Miss with Austin Simmons. Certainly not Auburn. I want to say Oklahoma. I think they could be over the 6.5 win total. I love Mateer, but I just don't know if they have enough offensively. And hopefully Arbuckle could coach them up. 23-1, it's possible, but I would rather take a shot on South Carolina. I think the team, from a win total perspective, that's getting no love this year, absolutely none, is Arkansas. And I understand difficult schedule. Ooh, pig suey. Ooh, pig suey. 5.5 with Taylon Green and that team, Russell at the running back position, plus 110 to the over. And I know Sam Pittman, you know, everybody loved him a few years ago. He was a covering machine. Anytime you give Sam Pittman points, he covers and all of that. I get that. But he went through a little bit of a transition. He lost KJ Jefferson. That hurt, obviously. When you have KJ and you know, you went toe-to-toe with Alabama with KJ as a 20.5 point dog 2 years ago, and all of a sudden he moves on to UCF. bad life choice in terms of that as well with Gus Malzahn. It's amazing that Gus couldn't get the most out of him. But Braylon Russell and Taylon Green, and you go and you look at their schedule, I know it's tough, but 5.5 with plus money to the over, Alabama A&M, Arkansas State, potentially 2-0. Ole Miss, not easy. Ole Miss blew them out of the water in the Grove. Not in the Grove, in Fayetteville. Smashed them. Jackson Dart had a great game. Memphis, not going to be easy. But, I mean, you would think, and Memphis, again, I think Memphis, when we talk about teams, group of 5 and being undefeated, I think Memphis has a very good shot with Lewis coming over from Nevada, the quarterback. And this is where people don't like to bet. You get Alabama A&M. You get Arkansas State, okay, 2-0. And then here we go. Ole Miss, Memphis, Notre Dame, Tennessee. Okay. I'll just say this. Forget the Ole Miss game. Memphis in the Liberty Bowl, from a physicality perspective, they should be able to push around Memphis in the trenches. Not an easy game. Memphis is well coached. Ryan Silverfield does a fantastic job. I mentioned Lewis, but if they just run the football with Taylor Green and Braylon Russell and that heavy physical offensive line, they can wear down Memphis. So if they're 3-1, they lose to Notre Dame. They beat Tennessee last year, 19-14. Okay, Joey Aguilar and the Vols better live up to expectations. So we'll give them that loss because it's in Knoxville, even though crazy games happen in Knoxville in terms of Arkansas and Tennessee, right? They've had some crazy, wild games. A&M in your house, winnable. Auburn, I told you how I feel about them. Miss State, LSU, Texas, Missouri. Now, is Bo Prabula the guy? Is Bo Prabula going to lead Missouri to the promised land? Because it's a rivalry game. You watched that game last year with Brady Cook in the snow. Arkansas should have covered that game. That being aside, it's in Fayetteville, so they should be in a position to eclipse 6 wins. Miss State, Auburn, Memphis, Arkansas State, Alabama A&M, and I'll give them either Missouri or A&M. I'll give them one of those 2 games to get them at least 6 or 7 wins. I like the team. I like Taylon Green, and I like Pittman. I think they can get there at plus 110 to the over. I'll give you a couple others, and then I'll call it a day, and we'll be on throughout the week. Coach Bowden and I are going to set up the podcast as well. Like I said, I love this format. We could just rip. You have any questions, hit me up in the chat. Hit me up on Twitter. This is what it's all about. I want to start talking everything. USC to the over, minus 162. That's what a normal team and just a team as a whole with a quarterback, right? USC's schedule, if Lincoln Riley, and I've said this, if Lincoln Riley doesn't get to at least 8 wins this year, what are you paying for? What are you paying for as an organization and a team? $11 million. This guy wasn't supposed to go to mediocre bowl games and be 7-6 overall. You're not supposed to lose to Mike Locksley and PJ Fleck in the Big Ten and get smacked around and have Steve Belichick completely close down your offense with Miller Moss in Washington. You lost 3 games. You lost 6 games last year. You knock off LSU to start the year and you slowly regress. And as a head coach, you've done absolutely nothing with great talent in LA. And now I'm supposed to believe you're going to get through Missouri State, Georgia Southern. Congrats, Lincoln. You're 2-0, guy. Purdue, 3-0 with Barry Odom in a major rebuild. Michigan State, you're 4-0. Illinois, Brett Bielema's a better coach than you. Michigan, they're tougher than you, They smacked you around when you had them dead to rights and you were throwing the football all around and still couldn't find out a game plan in the second half. They'll most likely beat you, whether it be Mikey Keene or Bryce Underwood, okay? And then, let's see. Notre Dame, you threw for over 200 yards, but you had 2 pick sixes for Jordan Mayava and that team. Nebraska in Lincoln, good luck. You'll beat Northwestern. You might lose to Iowa. You might lose to Oregon. And good luck on your UCLA team. So my point is the schedule should get them to 8 or 9 wins. But it's Lincoln Riley. And I'll say it again, gutless Lincoln Riley. Because anybody that thinks Lincoln Riley's a good coach needs to have their head examined. Because he's done absolutely nothing. He's a terrible second half game manager. He's exactly the equivalent of Mike McDaniel, the coach of the Miami Dolphins in the NFL side. When the game plan works right from the outset, Lincoln Riley's a great head coach. Ask him to make halftime adjustments in a big spot against Matt Campbell at Iowa State when he has Baker Mayfield as a 19.5-point home favorite. He loses. Has an 18-point lead in the college football playoff at half against Kirby Smart. Loses. Can't beat Kyle Whittingham and Utah that had basically a team that was getting run into the ground. And granted, Caleb got hurt, but you're still good enough to win that game, and you lost the Pac-12 championship. You beat LSU, and you limped down the stretch, but you beat Louisville in a bowl game. Woo-hoo! Great job, Link. Get real. Sold for USC, plus 132 to the under. And I'll end it on this. One team that I think just from Damon Williams and Washington, the schedule lines up another 7.5 win total. They lose Steve Belichick to North Carolina. I get that. But plus 102 to the over, for me, isn't bad value. I think the schedule is light. I think they could get there. So we'll see exactly what transpires. I'll be on again throughout the week. We're going to be chopping it up. Hit me up on Twitter. I'll be back with Coach Bowden. We're going to run it. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. And college football is just getting started, baby.